It is their job to earn my vote. It is not my job to fall in line.
Arab and Muslim voters in Michigan are ready to abandon the Democratic Party.
There's nothing worse than genocide. There is nothing worse than watching our babies' brains spilled out day in and day out, people being buried alive under the rubble. There is nothing worse than that.
Any candidate or any political party that has been complicit in providing political cover and material support for a genocide is not worth voting for.
We're back talking to voters in Dearborn, Michigan, home to the largest Arab American community in the U.S. When we came here last October, the Arab Americans we spoke to were adamantly anti-Biden. Now there's a new nominee and an even higher death toll in Gaza. We've returned 1 year later and are asking people how they're planning to vote in the presidential election.
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Lexis Zeidan is a Christian Palestinian-American activist who grew up in Dearborn.
My grandparents are all people who've been victims of the 1948 Nakba. My dad's family grew up in Jaffa, which a lot of people know as current-day Tel Aviv. A lot of them left Palestine and became refugees because of what happened in 1948 of being displaced out of their homes unjustly, unlawfully, in a way that was dehumanizing and in a way that's happening to Palestinians in this very moment.
She says that the demographic in Dearborn has a unique perspective on the election.
And we see our parents that came from nothing, from war-torn countries that have been war-torn by our own tax dollars, still come here and create something for their family and contributed to a society that in a sense has betrayed them.
When we last spoke to her a few weeks after October 7th, Lexis was clear that she would not vote for Joe Biden. Now that Kamala Harris is the nominee, she says she and other people in the community don't know who they're going to vote for president.
People don't know what to do. And two options of a fascist like Trump and Harris, who was under an administration that directly funded this genocide.
Because of the way U.S. presidential elections and the Electoral College are set up, the candidate who wins the most votes in a state usually gets all the state's votes in the Electoral College. That means certain swing states like Michigan are more likely to sway the election.
We've been saying for months now that we want them to implement an arms embargo to, stop supporting the occupation and the killing of Palestinians. And that demand has clearly fallen on deaf ears, unfortunately. And so people almost feel like, what is there to do?
Lexis is one of the co-founders of the Uncommitted campaign, which asked voters to cast a protest vote against Joe Biden in the Democratic Party primaries. In Michigan's primary in February, more than 100,000 people voted uncommitted, many of them protesting the U.S. government's policy on Gaza. But now there's a new nominee.
And at the end of the day, you come down to this reality that there's Harris and there's Trump. My biggest thing is I want people to go to the polls and civically engage and vote. But also I want people to understand that what we do outside the ballot box is actually far more important than what we do inside the ballot box.
To Lexis, the movement is not just about making change, but also creating a space for those affected by the genocide.
In pain and trauma and grief, we forget to also pause and kind of breathe and really recognize that art and culture can help mobilize people.
When we met up with her, she was preparing a spoken word poem to perform at a rally.
And when someone asks me, where's my smile? I tell them I sent it to the children of Palestine 6,000 miles away. It's in the land where olive trees witness bombings each and every day, where the sun paints hues on resilient Palestinians who always find their way.
Michigan is home to more than 300,000 Arab Americans. Immigrants from present-day Syria and Lebanon came here in the beginning of the 20th century to work in car manufacturing factories. And with each outbreak of war and mass displacement in the Middle East, more and more Arab immigrants called Michigan home.
Dearborn is home to the largest Arab American population in the country. If you drive down, just down the street, you'll see a lot of Arab American-owned restaurants and businesses. This is the home of Arab America.
While in Dearborn, we also reconnected with Adam Abusalah. Adam volunteered for the Biden campaign in 2020, but now Adam says he can't endorse the party.
This administration right now has continued to support Israel with their actions within the last 11 months and really haven't changed anything. So for us, talking to our families back home, talking to people here in our community, we're really hurt by this administration. 40,000 people dead, 20,000 children dead. This is just too much for any of us to say, let's look past this and continue to support the Democratic Party.
When Joe Biden dropped out of the race and Kamala Harris became the nominee, Adam was initially hopeful. but he says he's been disappointed in the campaign statements since then.
You know, we hear a lot of talks about a ceasefire, but Kamala Harris and everybody, they say, you know, we want a ceasefire, but, and then what we want to see is a permanent ceasefire.
The week we traveled to Dearborn, the city was hosting ArabCon. At the convention, Arab political leaders and organizers were discussing the community's role in this year's election. Arab and Muslim voters overwhelmingly supported the Democratic Party in 2020. An estimated 69% of them voted for Biden in the last election. That helped Democrats in Michigan, where margins have historically been slim.
Obviously, to state that Donald Trump only won by 10,000 votes in 2016, and we just saw 101,000 people vote uncommitted. So this is definitely a state that Democrats should be paying attention to. You know, I know right now in the polls, Kamala Harris is up, but guess what? Hillary Clinton, a week before elections, was up 10% in Michigan, and she ended up losing to Donald Trump by 10,000 votes.
Now, a recent national poll puts Kamala Harris's support with the Muslim community at 30%, and that's tied with the percentage of Muslim Americans who say they're planning on voting for Jill Stein and the Green Party. And that number includes Adam.
You know, the Arab and Muslim community knows very well what a Trump presidency looks like. Many people in this community were impacted by the Trump presidency. He is a threat to our country. He's a threat to our democracy. So we also need to talk about Kamala Harris being a threat to our democracy and the Democratic Party being a threat to our democracy. As it stands right now, I'm going to vote for Jill Stein. Right now, we have a choice between candidates who have been continuous supporters of Netanyahu and the genocide that's going on. And we also have a candidate who has called this a genocide. I really don't understand why Democrats would think that out of the three candidates, we would go with them.
And some of the people we spoke to at ArabCon echoed Adam's sentiment.
I'm a registered Democrat, but I am voting for Jill Stein.
It's important to show that the two options that we're presented with aren't necessarily our only two options.
I'm definitely not voting for genocide, so I definitely will be voting for an independent candidate who supports my belief.
If we give away that principle, which is what we would be doing by voting for Harris or Trump for that matter, then we've acquiesced to genocide.
The Democratic Party's refusal to hold Israel accountable has even caused longtime supporters to question their loyalty. Ali Dagher is a Lebanese-American lawyer working in Dearborn. He's a lifelong Democrat and has been volunteering in presidential campaigns since the 80s.
One of the best campaigns I've ever worked on was the Obama campaign. I loved it because it was pure passion. We went to the convention. It was amazing to see an African-American become president, especially with a guy whose name was Barack Hussein Obama. This galvanized my kids, this galvanized all of us into believing in the spirit of the Democratic Party and its values.
We traveled to Michigan before Israel escalated its attack on Lebanon. Israel has killed at least 2,000 people in Lebanon in the past year. One of those victims being Lebanese-American Kamil Jawad from Dearborn. The majority of people of Arab descent in Dearborn have ties to Lebanon, including Ali, who still has family in the south.
It's going to be a close election. I really don't know how things are going to go. I think the Arab American community is likely not to vote for Harris. I'm fairly certain of that. If the war had stopped a couple of weeks ago or it stopped a month ago, there may have been some time for reconsideration. The killing that's going on in Gaza, the killing that's going on in that entire region is just wrong. There is some amount of betrayal that I felt. I don't know how I'm going to vote. I'm not going to lie to you. In my heart, I don't want Trump to win. I think he's not just a disaster for Arab Americans, but he's also a disaster for all Americans. Deep in my heart, I'm rooting for her.
Ali's family history is deeply tied to Michigan's labor unions, which are known for having a significant influence on the outcome of elections. Ali's father was a member of the United Auto Workers Union, UAW for short, which often is vocal in state and federal politics.
And if it wasn't for him getting a job as a UAW worker, we'd be living in poverty. And that's why I'm 100% supporter of labor. I march with them. I do whatever I can to be a part of the union. You can't live in this area without being in some form impacted by the UAW.
The union endorsed Kamala Harris for president, but also called for a permanent ceasefire in Palestine and Israel.
We're the grandkids and children of the UAW. And by calling for an immediate ceasefire, the UAW did stand up and do the right thing. And we're hoping that UAW continues to influence the administration.
While the majority of UAW members voted for Joe Biden in 2020, it's unclear how its endorsement will influence the upcoming election.
We want a president that's going to tell someone like Netanyahu, you don't own the United States Congress. And we need the American people to regain the power that has been lost. We need our country back. That's the problem here. Is she that person? I don't know.
And that sentiment of I don't know is what we heard a lot at ArabCon.
It's a time in history in American politics where we're choosing from the bottom of the barrel.
Disappointed is an understatement, for Kamala's position on Gaza. And at the same time, I think Donald Trump would be disastrous for our country.
The reality is it is a Democratic administration that is funding and excusing genocide. It is a Democratic administration that is allowing the biggest land grab in the West Bank in 20 years. It's really hard to look at somebody in my community and say, it's going to be worse. The genocide is going to be worse.
Men, women, and children are being slaughtered, and we're paying for it, and we're funding it, and it's our weapons. That's my main issue.
Do I want to stop Donald Trump from becoming president again? Or do I want to, vote my conscience and demonstrate also the power of the Arab American and Muslim vote?
That feeling of uncertainty is present for Lexis and the Uncommitted campaign as well.
The campaign, VP Harris, the administration, they have repeatedly said to us that they actually don't want us to mobilize their people, that they're willing to put those votes on the table. They don't want the resistance in the party. They want to be able to navigate and operate in a way where nobody's pushing back against their inhumane and unjust policies.
The Uncommitted campaign refused to endorse any presidential candidate for this election. But it also said it would not recommend voting third party.
If Harris does not move as it relates to policy, I cannot come out and endorse Harris. It's just not something I can do. And as it relates to third party, I just can't, in my good conscience, recommend a vote for a third party. And in my personal assessment, voting third party is a vote that's almost serving as a protest vote against people that feel very angry, and rightfully so, against the decisions that the Democratic Party has made. But the question I put back on people is, what does that decision do for saving Palestinian lives right now?
Some in the Arab and Muslim community were angered by the Uncommitted campaign's refusal to endorse any third-party candidate. But as more and more Arab and Muslim voters stop being loyal to the Democratic Party, it could make Kamala Harris's path to the White House extremely difficult. No matter who wins the presidency in the US, Lexis doesn't think US foreign policy in the Middle East will change. Which is why she says she's focused on the day after the election.
We far too often react in a moment of crises. What infrastructure are we building right now so we don't have to be reactive to things that are happening, that we have enough infrastructure built to create influence, to create change? What are we doing as a community on the very next day after the election to grow our movement? And so for me, I want to see that movement continue to grow. I want to see coalitions build across communities of color, across lines of difference, to see the influence that movements from the people in the streets to the student encampments to what Uncommitted has done, to see the influence that it has had on people across not just our country, but the globe. And the way people are courageously speaking up for Palestine, that's truly a silver lining, and that shows me that we're doing exactly what needs to be done.